silence. Okay, thank you very much for coming this afternoon, everybody. As you're aware, this is a question time type event, if anyone wants that programme. These are several of our local parliamentary prospective candidates. Tim Loughton was the MP for East Worthing and Shoreham, so he was a member of Parliament in the previous government. Hopefully this evening should be quite interesting in terms of getting to know our local politicians better, understanding their parties better, perhaps getting more of an insight into the way they're thinking, how they can represent us as a student body at Northbrook and make a difference in the future. So I'd like to welcome Hazel Thorpe, who is UKIP Liberal Democrat. Liberal Democrat party member. Tim Cross, who is Pt1 for Worthing West End and a UKIP party member. Tim Loughton, as I said, who was the East Worthing Shoreham constituency MP, Conservative. Daniel Parsonage from the Green Party, I believe he's not a PVC candidate.
No, I'm the council candidate for Central Wing.
So slightly more local politics, very good. And at the end we've got Tim Macpherson, who's PPC for Labour.
In East Worthing and Shoreham.
East Worthing and Shoreham. Okay. So I'd like to start just by getting the party, or the representatives of the party here to explain a little bit more about who they are and who their party is. And kicking that off with Russell Brand's rather provocative statement a year and a half ago. I've never voted. Like most people, I am utterly disenchanted by politics. Like most people, I regard politicians as frauds and liars, and the current political system as nothing more than a bureaucratic means for furthering the ornamentation and advantages of economic elites. So I would like to ask you each in turn whether you agree or disagree with Mr. Brand, if you guess that, and why you would oppose that. If we start with Hazel.
Thank you. Afternoon, everyone. Do I agree with Russell Brand? No.
Shock!
That's a bit of a shock, isn't it? I do understand where he's coming from, because I do, as a Liberal Democrat, I actually fight for the people who need me to fight for them. And I don't believe that the elite need me to fight for them. They can fight for themselves. They have the money to fight for themselves. They have the power and the influence. So actually, the Liberal Democrat are the party of the people who cannot stand up for themselves, and quite often they don't vote. Why don't they vote? It's not because they're not interested, it is not because they can't be bothered. It's because they're far too busy trying to survive on food banks and other situations where they're being taxed beyond belief. People who need to be on benefits, not because they're scroungers, but actually because they have to live with an additional need. They have to live with a disability, a health issue, which actually prevents them from going out to work. Things like MS or ME, things that we don't necessarily address.
Thank you, Hazel. Same to you, Tim Cross. Why should people vote for UKIP?
Strangely enough, actually, I agree with Russell Brand for the first time in a very long time, because I think what he's actually saying is that he doesn't trust any of the current political parties to represent the people properly. And I think he's got a point. Until UKIP came along, nobody was actually representing the people of Britain and the British people. The other parties are absolutely wedded to the European Union. We're in the European Union, we're being controlled by the European Union, and we're subject to EU law. Now, unless we come out of the European Union, that is going to continue. And what we're doing at UKIP is we're giving you a chance to make a change. And I think this country needs a change. I think we need a change where the people of this country can engage with their politicians and actually get what they want. So, At the moment, I go around the streets of Worthing, and in the last few elections that I stood in 1997, 2001, 2005 in this constituency. And when I first stood, the turnout rate was just over 80%, 75%. And the next time I stood, it went down to 58%. The next time I stood, it was around about 62%. So in effect, 40% of the people are not voting. And that says to me that if you had a ballot, if you had a sort of section on the ballot sheet with no confidence in any of the above, that probably would have formed a government the last few times everybody voted. So I think there's a chance now that people have got a chance to vote for an alternative, a vote for a party that says we want to come out of the European Union, we want to control our borders, we want to run our own affairs, we want to run our own economy, we do not want to be wasting money, £55 million a day being given to the European Union.
Okay, thank you. Same to you, Tim.
Well, there's the first shock of the afternoon that UKIP agree with Russell Brand. I don't think Russell Brand would take that very kindly. And I think Russell Brand is a complete pain in the arse for this reason, because just saying that it's not worth voting, I don't trust anybody, therefore let's not bother, is the way you create a vacuum that lets in extremists into positions of power. Whether you like politicians or like the political system or not, most of the decisions that affect your everyday lives are as results of decisions made by politicians. The courses you're studying here at Northbrook, the cost of transport to get you to and from Northbrook, the levels of tax you will be or may already be paying, these are all as a result of political decisions. And just opting out of that is not the answer. And one thing that really worries me, and I was the Minister for Children and Young People for 2.5 years, is that the turnout at the last election was 65%, which is appalling, although it's gone up slightly more, so 2/3 of people vote. But the turnout amongst 18 to 24-year-olds, many of you here, many voting for the very first time, was 43%. So more people than not decided they couldn't be bothered or didn't want to, weren't inspired enough to go and vote. And that is not the option, because if you don't do politics, you get politics done for you. And don't be surprised where so many of different parties' policies are aimed at older voters, pensioners and others, and younger people get a raw deal. And you have got to be engaged. This is part of that engagement process, those of you being interested to come on this afternoon, to get your voice heard. Because the things that affect pensioners, the things that affect most of my constituents, and you are all the same, is making sure we've got a decent economy. We need to keep the economy back on track as we have done under this government, in order to pay for good public services, to make sure we have Worthing Hospital, one of the best and safest hospitals in the country, in order to make sure we get the A27 upgraded at long last, although worryingly the Labour Party this week were threatening to drop it in their manifesto. And also to make sure that you have the power to make decisions on who runs this country, and that's why we need to have a referendum on our future with Europe. Not because everything that goes wrong is the fault of Europe and those terrible Europeans at UKIP would have us believe, but because this country has had an uneasy relationship with Europe for too many years, and it needs to be resolved one way or the other for the future. And that's why we want, need and must have a referendum, which is what the Conservative Party have promised. And finally, what you also need as an MP is somebody who isn't just distant at Westminster you never see, but somebody who is part of the community, as I have been for the last 18 years, involved in local issues, out every Saturday doing street searches in my case, very approachable and hands-on. And that's what people need to try and restore faith and engagement in the political process.
Thank you, Tim. Daniel?
Well, we've heard three interesting reasons why you should vote there. I've been knocking doors as well. One of the reasons I've heard people don't vote is because you vote for one party, you end up with a coalition that you didn't want in the first place. So that seems like something that's is fairly true. I'm not sure the fact that UKIP people keep on standing, the turnout goes down is necessarily indicative, but if the idea is you should vote, otherwise older people will be overrepresented, that's from the party in power, who are saying that we will only represent older people unless you vote. Fair enough, I can see that point. Personally, I'd rather you voted for what you believed in, and you went out and you thought about what difference you want to see in the world and voted for that. We're the only parties against austerity. We're the only party who would restore the educational maintenance allowance. We're the only party who lowered the voting age to 16.
No, you're not.
It's not true.
We're not?
No.
Fantastic.
We have a Labour Party manifesto. It's
I
pledged.
haven't read the Labour Party manifesto. I'm not. We're the cancel student debt, which was introduced by the Labour Party, and we're one of the major party who are going to support getting rid of Triton. We don't see a future for nuclear weapons in this country. Vote for something you believe in. Go online, do a vote for policies, go on Political Compass, do an online survey about what you believe in and who you should vote for. That's the reason you should vote.
Well, I kind of agree with some things that Russell Brand said. I don't agree with the way he said it. I also agree with some of the things that Tim said.
Which one?
Because he has a point. There is a disengagement with politics. I think actually this election I found in the thousands of people I've spoken to over the last 9 months is a lot more engagement than there was 5 years ago. I think people see a very clear choice this time, whereas last time they were, we had MP's expenses, we had a bank crash, which is still reverberating, of course. And but now there's a clear choice between two potential governments with very different visions of where the country should go. One of them, I believe, looks after the wealthy and the rich, and the other party that would like to form a government is on the side of working people and working families, and our manifesto, which was launched the other day, proves that. But I think, in terms of what Russell was saying, I think there is disengagement amongst young people. I think they find politicians very boring. You just need to turn on and watch Prime Minister's Question Time, and I'm sure Tim will back this up. He's in the chamber every week listening to it, or being there. It is not a good advert for politicians and politics, and it's surprising that people get turned off. But I think really the rise of these online groups like 38 Degrees and others has actually re-energised a lot of young people. And dare I say it, the rise of some of the smaller parties, they've got a bigger voice, and I think that's engaged people. And it gives more plurality, and I think that's a very good thing. As long as they don't steal my votes. The thing is, it's we as politicians, I think, have a responsibility to have mature debates about things and not slag people off and basically perform character assassinations on television. That kind of thing just really does turn people off.
Okay, thank you very much. The general format for today is that we've been fielding questions from probably most of the audience members here and other people, students at Northbrook, which I have a selection of with me here, which I'm going to put to the candidates. If there is, however, any follow-up questions that you would like to ask in the audience today, just put your hand in the air, and once we've asked some of these questions, I'll come over to you. So if there's any point where you already want to intersect, feel free, we can make this as interactive as we feel like today. Obviously, we're a further education and higher education college at Northbrook with a broad spectrum of courses studied, a lot of focus on the creative industries here. Education and fees and making that accessible has been an important issue. So one of the questions we have I'd like to kick off with is, what is your party's position on the STEM versus STEAM debate in education? Anybody unfamiliar with the acronyms? There is a current government drive on promoting STEM subjects, which are science, technology, engineering and mathematics. And there's a reaction against this that should be STEAM, it should include the arts as well. Let's start with Tim Loughton. Why is the government doing STEM and not STEAM?
Well, the two aren't mutually exclusive, and the problem we've had in this country is, I think there's been an apartheid almost in education. Too many schools have been geared up to getting young people into university as the only benchmark of how well we are doing. And it's also created those who go to university and the also runs. And I think that's been deeply damaging, because I think in the past we've had too many people going to university for whom that wasn't the most appropriate way forward, and we have quite a high dropout rate, and that's not in anybody's interest, taxpayers and the students themselves. But there are a lot more people who seem to be written off at an early stage simply because of their background, or they're never going to be high achievers. And I think that is nonsense, which is why some of our colleges locally are so important. Northbrook is such a good example and is rated good by Ofsted as well, in encouraging a range of other vocational qualifications and futures for young people. But it's no good unless you have got the basics of literacy, numeracy, and some academic expanse within that as well. Because whatever job you go into, however creative, however manual, or whatever, you need those basic and transportable skills. And if you've got those, then we can have successful creative industries as well. And in this country, we do remarkably well in the creative industries. We don't sell ourselves well enough as a home of a lot of creative, artistic talent. So the two are not mutually exclusive.
In terms of transportable skills, are not creativity, problem solving, teamwork and collaboration, social and empathetic skills almost more broadly applicable than understanding the plan and Pythagoras theory?
Yes, but all of those things will fall down unless you have the basic elements of how to run a business to make sure the figures add up, and how to communicate in good order. And we have too many young people coming out of school falling well below the basic levels of literacy and numeracy, and it needs to be tackled early on in the education system. A third of children who are coming out of primary school well below the literacy and numeracy levels expected at what they should be. And 1 in 5, I think it is, of adults in this country have the literacy and numeracy skills expected of an 11-year-old as well. And that is a legacy of too many years of neglecting giving people those basic skills.
Thank you, Tim. If we can take that, bring me over to the other end of the political spectrum, Hazel.
Thank you.
Other end of the political spectrum.
Slight
Coalition.
And coalition means working together. It doesn't mean agreeing with everything that Tim said. If I can speak from my own experience, I used to be a teacher. I used to teach at King's Manor in Shoreham. Woo! Hey, I had one.
I'm sure you have more.
I have a lot more. Yes, so I was a teacher there, and I actually taught mathematics, I taught art, I taught dressmaking, I taught technical graphics, all sorts of unusual subjects for a woman. Basically because I had a good education from a technical school, which in those days was quite modern for women to do engineering type skills. I've also got qualifications in heat and hydraulics. So I've got quite a range of skills which I don't actually use anymore because I'm a politician now. But I'm actually, to some extent, I agree with Tim. Sorry, I didn't mean to say that. But you, in that we need all of those skills. And I'd like to point out that there is a particular subject, it's the HS2, you know, the high-speed rail. And that's particularly important because that particular project, although others might not agree with me, that's actually creating the situation, the investment for 2 new colleges, one for engineering and one for the railway industry. This means that those students who go there will actually be helping promote a very strong, sustainable economy, which will help all of us here. So actually...
Specifically in relation to the question, what are the Lib Dems doing to promote and support arts subjects at that kind of the low level?
We always support the arts.
In real terms, how? What do you think have you done?
In real terms, we support funding for higher education, in the fact that recently there were some cuts with campaign. Vince Cable has come back and said that he's looking at the VAT review of colleges and schools so that more funding can come your way.
Okay, thank you, Hazel. If we go down to Dan.
Me?
I looked at you.
Not sure
I
if
said Dan.
You're me or Dan? Me. Well, what are we going to do? Well, actually, it's interesting what Tim said earlier, because because this government has actually been reducing they've actually downgraded creative subjects in education, and in fact there was one Tory MP, I can't remember his name, who was actually making fun of people who did degrees in beauty therapy, and that's particularly relevant to my experience because my daughter, who was an academic, went through college, got a qualification in beauty therapy, and because of that she was able to start a successful business for herself, and she would not have been able to do that without that kind of focus, and that was a direct result of some of the policies that the Labour Party pursued when it was in power. What we're going to do is refocus our education policy to reinstate creative arts and also vocational subjects in the educational curriculum, and also reverse the worrying change in removing the sort of continual assessment from GCSEs, which I think is a big mistake, and it's something that's been proved over 30 years to work in education. It baffles me that change has been made. Plus, we want to remove the central command that seems to have developed from the education department, the meddling in local schools, which goes on all over the country. I think you just need to talk to any head teacher anywhere around the country, and I've spoken to a few, and it is quite wary, the meddling that goes on. I mean, I have to say that the governments of all colours have been guilty of this kind of behaviour, and I think we've recognised that. We've got to devolve power much more locally for education authorities to work, because each area has its own catchment, its own issues, and it's nonsense for Westminster to decide, in a minute detail what education policy should be put in place and what curriculums should be put in place locally. So
you're mentioning that focusing on levels and tracking the progress and all the data. Was it not the Labour Party did actually bring in?
As I said, all governments I think have been guilty of meddling and focusing too much on that kind of thing. I think Tristan Hunt said a couple of times already, it's in our manifesto that we're going to change that approach.
Okay. We bring the question over to Tim Cross. I noticed on UKIP's website that there was a pledge to reduce tuition fees from students studying the STEM type subjects, provided they were to stay in the country and pay tax in this country for 5 years, but again exclusively focusing on science, technology, engineering and maths, and not the arts.
Yeah, I mean, we are the only party that wants to abolish the tuition fees for the STEM, which is the science, technology, engineering, maths, and medicine. But I can see that there is a big demand from the art point of view, because fortunately I went to a private school, and my children went to a private school as well. And art is very, very much an important part of the curriculum in a private school. So I can actually say that I would wholly support some sort of support from the art side of it, because I think the arts actually creates the mind, expands the mind, and allows you to visualise things that you want to do in the future. You're not down a particular path. You can open your mind up, and I was very lucky to have a young student who actually comes to this college, Sheridan Carpenter, who wrote an article for me in my local newspaper and drew a picture for me, which was very, very good. So I am personally very much in support of the arts, but we are the only party that will abolish student tuition fees for the STEM subjects as well.
I got an EMA when I was growing up. I was the first one in my family to do GCSEs and O-levels. Without educational maintenance allowance, I wouldn't have been able to go to college and do A-levels. Nobody asked me when I applied for that if I was doing maths or art or film or medicine or engineering. It was about being a better person, a better contributor to society, be that through art or engineering. The Green Party would abolish all tuition fees and cancel all tuition debt in order to get people from all backgrounds into university. And I know Tim Cross thinks it's unfortunate he went to private school, but I didn't. I went to it was the largest comprehensive in the UK at the time, and it was fantastic. The kind of paradox of private schools is that they're charities. We'd abolish that. Enabling more funding to go into comprehensive schools, supporting the arts in every way we possibly can. We're a party that believes in human expression, doing things that are worthwhile. I've been 2 years in a row to the fine art exhibition at Northbrook. I bring my 5-year-old daughter, and sometimes she's slightly confused, and sometimes she's really engaged, and sometimes it's fantastic, and sometimes I have to explain to her what's going on. But that's important, isn't it? Isn't that the whole point of art, is that you challenge yourself as a human being that makes society a better place?
I mean, yeah, and we understand and appreciate and value the idea of these like people, but how is this funded? Where is the support that comes for all these students?
Where's the money coming?
We will be introducing higher taxes for corporations, increasing corporation tax, increasing tax on the highest earners in the country, cracking down on tax avoidance, and particularly on political leaders with money in tax havens.
Who?
Well, exactly. Yeah.
Who? Political leaders with money in tax havens. We need to know that.
We need to know, yes.
Purely hypothetical tax leaders with money in tax havens.
So none of them.
No, those don't exist.
So it's imaginary, right?
So remember, as we're listening to the responses from various party members, you can feel free to stick your hands up and ask a question if you want to go any deeper.
Oh, here we go.
So I just want to do it quite later on. You know, it's big corporations like Google, Starbucks, Amazon, always avoiding their tax. So what would you have to do to keep them paying their tax? Like,
Yeah. So you've mentioned you're going to tax the corporations and the wealthy higher. These people do seem to be the people who are best at avoiding tax and paying less as a percentage of their general income.
Well, one of the most interesting cuts during the coalition has been the cuts to Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. We know for every pound we spend on HMRC, we bring £6 back into the economy. That seems to me like a valuable use of money. If they were given the authority to go after tax avoidance, change the law to look at the way the tax avoidance is done, the abolishing of non-domicile status in the country, these are all ways to crack down tax avoidance.
But they don't bring in money, do they? That's the problem. The whole issue about non-domiciles is the Labour Party has admitted it might actually cost money rather than produce money. But what we need to do on tax avoidance is the HMRC, the tax avoidance department, has actually been doubled. And we brought in, so far in this government, £5 billion additional that was being avoided in tax. And in the last budget, just last week, the Google tax has come in. So any companies who are deliberately transporting profits from the UK to somewhere else to avoid tax are now subject to a flat rate of 25%, which is now the corporation tax. We've now got all these agreements with Switzerland and other states where they have to reveal information about people who are domiciled in this country, who are sheltering assets overseas. That's going to bring in about £8 billion. So for the Green Party to say that all this wonderful shopping list of everything they're going to do is going to be funded by all of this, £5 billion is already coming in. And if you take it too far, of course those people leave altogether and they'll be paying their tax and avoiding paying their tax in somebody else's country rather than
I
ours.
know this is a slight cliche to bring in against the Conservatives, but over the past 5 years there's been a major crackdown in collecting tax revenues, particularly hit the small and medium-sized business owners. Isn't it the case that getting those easier targets people and and protecting or ignoring or going, oh, these people bring in lots of money, they're richer than non-domiciled students because they support your party financially the most.
But whose? Which ones are those to support our party?
Major tax owners.
Who? He's not a company, he's
No, he's not a company, but people with those type.
Who?
I heard something. I'll look some up.
Well, if you're Vodafone does not contribute to the Tory party. Google does not contribute to the Tory party. Amazon does not contribute to the Tory party. These are not Tory party donors or anybody else. So let's just use the facts here. We have introduced the harshest regime now in the last budget for companies deliberately trying to avoid tax in this country, something that never happened in 13 years after the last Labour government. It's already brought in 5 billion, it's going to bring in 8 billion a year. That is a real crackdown. These are real measures that are happening and will get tougher.
So you 5 years to do it though.
Well, it took you 13 years to do it. Well, it took you 13 years to do absolutely nothing.
That's not true.
For the last 5 years, 5 billion increments, a billion a year, approximately.
5 billion a year it's now bringing in.
5 billion a year. I thought it was 5 billion over the last 5 years, I thought that.
Well, actually, to be fair, it hasn't actually. It's only just been brought in the last budget. So it hasn't brought anything in yet at all.
Where does it bring in the non-dom charge?
Well, we're going to abolish non-dom legislation completely. It's iniquitous.
Once we do have this money from like avoiding tax corporations, so Google, so you name whatever, where will this go? Because I know it's also, within bringing this money from tax, we're also cutting NHS, some education, so where's the money actually going? Or have you got another duck pond somewhere?
If I could just come in here, we've actually, in the taxes that we have announced, the mansion tax, the windfall tax on tobacco companies, cutting, not increasing corporation tax, all of those pools of money are being allocated specifically either for the National Health Service or for small businesses or for education. It's very clearly set out, and we have announced our what we call a fiscal unlock, which means that we are not going to borrow any money that we cannot account for by raising specifically in another area. So we're not borrowing money to fund the health service, we're not borrowing money to fund any of our plans at all, not even some capital investment projects, because we recognise that we need to get this deficit down. Now, I know we're sort of moving away from education, which which is what we're talking about, but I think it's important to bear that in mind.
Sorry, Hazel, I think you
Can I just add something here? That actually it was the coalition, two parties working together, who actually have been dealing with tax dodgers. And personally, I think they're doing a good job. They have employed over 2,500 extra staff, so that means more jobs for more people. They've also got the assistance of the French government to actually make sure that money laundering is dealt with. The information is given so that we can deal with these people who are abusing their system. And also, it means that people who actually help the tax dodgers will also be, in the future, will be prosecuted as a criminal offence. So I think, you might mock the coalition, you might mock the Tories, you certainly mock the Liberal Democrats, but at the end of the day, we have worked together, and where our policies overlap with Danny Alexander, we have brought some improvements. So I think, please think about that.
Is there anything you'll try on this subject?
Well, I just want to make sure that everybody's aware that our national debt is £1.5 trillion, rising every day. Our current account deficit is £100 billion, and there's no way, shape or form that the government at the moment can get that debt down. That's a debt on you. That's £25,000 for every person in this room and every person in the country. So we've got to recognise that. And if you're squandering £20 billion a year on the EU and £12 billion a year on foreign aid and £150 billion on EU directives, sometimes you've got to look at things where the money's actually going. And if you want to bring the deficit down, you want more money in the health service, and you want more money for education, you've got to look at why we should be actually paddling our own canoe, have our own government that's in control of its economy, and controlling our borders, because you cannot have 300,000 people coming in here year on year, because it's going to affect quite a lot of services, one being the NHS service. So we've got to look at that. And to try and always nitpick over the tax dodgers, the fact remains that the EU allows companies to put their company, their head office in any particular place in the European Union they like. And so if Liechtenstein's at 5%, it doesn't take a road scholar to work out where they're going to stick their head office. So that needs to be looked at. But the fact remains, if you come out of the EU, you can actually then tax the companies per se, and then get some money in. I don't think it's always nitpicking over non-DOMs here and £25,000 here and £5 there and all the rest of it. I think you've got to look at this in the whole scale of things and come out of the European Union, paddle and canoe.
Sorry, can I just come in and say, does anyone else in the room think we're squandering money on foreign aid? Because that seems to me like a fundamental thing the sixth richest country in the world should be doing.
Yeah.
We're borrowing money. Sorry, we're borrowing money to give money to somebody else. That's a bit strange. We're borrowing money to give. Sorry.
Human beings that need help, I don't mind.
We're very happy to give.
I don't mind paying more tax.
Okay, but we're very happy in UKIP. We're very happy to give money to.
I want you to help me.
Yeah, we will help you. If you're able, but don't think. Hang on, we don't think.
If we let the question be asked,
Yeah.
can you phrase it go again? I think the general gist was, is there a feeling in the room that you would be happy to pay taxes, that you are and are happy for that money to go and support humanitarian crises in other parts of the room? If you're happy for your money and our money collectively to support, say, Syrian refugees, could you just raise your hand? So let's have a show of you.
Not really squandered.
So that's
Hang on a second.
the majority of the audience.
Well, hang on a second. Let's clarify. Let's just clarify something. We are not talking about not giving money where it's really needed, like in Syria or Sierra Leone or something like that. No, we're not. Hang on a second. Don't. It's not what it is. We are talking about money going to places like China, India, just for.
None of the budget
Oh,
goes to China or India.
Yes, it does. Look, I'll just finish. All right, I'll just finish what I'm saying. Okay. So we're talking about cutting the foreign aid back, only giving money to where it's actually needed. So if there's a tsunami happens somewhere, we're very happy to give money there. If the Ebola comes out in Sierra Leone, we're happy to give money there. We're happy to give money to Syria for the refugees and things like that. So for the urgent foreign aid, we're very happy to give money. We just don't think it's necessary to give money to countries that actually don't need it, because actually we need it here. We can spend the money here on our people.
But it's a con, isn't it?
It's not a con.
Because
How is it a con?
most of the overseas aid budget goes on full-time relief of poverty and provision of education and housing and sanitation in countries that are much worse off than ourselves. It goes on refugee crises. I went to Jordan last year and visited the largest refugee camp in the world just over the border from Syria, where they are looking after 86,000 Syrian refugees. And I was very proud that Britain is one of the major donors to that, working with Oxfam, the Japanese and other nations, providing a really fantastic refugee camp for people in desperate circumstances with 5 schools, proper running water and everything, for people who want to go back to Syria. And I think the best place for them is to be able to keep them in an Arab-speaking country near to their own country, helping them, many of them getting rental accommodation in the local community as well. They're not just in those refugee camps. And yet Nigel Farage said, oh, we should take the Syrians over here. So you can't have it both ways. We're going to close the doors to immigrants, but no, we'll have Syrian refugees over here, which wasn't actually the best thing for those Syrian refugees who desperately wanted to be closer to Syria and to be able to go back to Syria. That is what overseas aid is all about, and that's what UKIP don't want to spend your money on, and I think it's disgraceful.
The thing is, you can't disengage from the world. You just can't do it. You can't float Britain off into the Atlantic and hope everything's going to be fine. And also, as a nation, we have an obligation to places that we had, we occupied 100 years ago, and those obligations are still in place. And if there's poverty in those countries, then I think we should deal with it. And I think that most people in this room would agree with that.
Okay, thank you. Can we move, unless we've got any more questions later on that, sorry.
It was just actually going back to the education.
Yes.
Okay.
Just back to the
Is this for Tim? You said...
Which one?
She's looking at me, so I'm assuming for me.
Yeah, you said your engagement with the arts was having a nice pretty picture drawn for you.
Well, as I said, one of the parts.
One of the things. But you didn't actually say why your party feels that the arts courses should have to pay loads of funding, whereas other courses don't.
I didn't actually say that. No, that was a personal
No,
opinion.
so you didn't explain why
was a
your
per-
party...
Oh, well, I didn't explain, but I don't actually necessarily agree with that side of my party's policy necessarily. But you don't have to agree with everything, you know, on your party. The simple point I'm making, I know some of you think that I went to, you know, because I went to a private school, it makes me better than everybody else. It doesn't, you know. No, it's not irrelevant because you know, the charitable status of a private school is actually vitally important because every child that goes to a private school is one less child in the state sector. So it's one less child in the classroom. And that has to be a good thing. And if you take away the charitable status, then you have to pay, then they'll have to pay tax, then the fees will go up, and less children have the chance to go to a private school. But I mean, you know, the point I'm making is that at the private schools, you do have the chance to on the arts side of it. So that's what we're saying. That's what I'm saying.
Sorry, that wasn't my question then.
Typical politician.
I mean, I think it's ironic that the party that claims to be the insurgent is actually, you know, is doing more to sort of reinforce people's cynical attitudes to politics than anything else.
Let's hand it up slightly longer at the back.
I'll just go back slightly and try to get from UKIP. You said that we had a £1.5 billion debt.
Trillion.
Trillion.
That's the second lowest out of the G8. Considering the actual economic position of the world at the time those debts had to be put in place, you say that it's not good that we have a £1.5 billion pound debt, which is less than a tenth of the $1.7 billion debt from America. So isn't
It was 1.5 trillion pounds.
Sorry,
It was 1.5 trillion pounds, and it's going up every day. So I don't think it's a good position to be in. I don't know about you, because it's actually a mortgage on the rest of your life. So that's not, to me, that's not a good position to be in. And the current account deficit is running at 100 billion. So you're in debt. And what we're saying simply is, why are you borrowing money? Why are you borrowing more money? You need to get the debt down. Surely we're okay at the moment because the interest rates are low, but we're still paying for over £40 billion a year on interest on that debt. That's not a good thing, surely.
when it's compared to the fact that the other G8 countries in the world, the only one doing better than us in that situation is Germany. So, how can you say?
But I mean, I don't, just
how can you
because,
say it's our personal policies in the country
just because,
that the rest of the G8 are even worse off than us?
well, they might well be. I still don't think it's a good thing to have a rising debt on your hand.
But you can't
Because
necessarily
it
blame
does-
what
sorry?
So you can't necessarily blame what previous was, but it is the economic situation of the entire world at the time and the reaction to that.
Yes, but I mean, the debt has gone up, is doubled in the last 5 years. Surely that's got to send some warning signs to somebody, hasn't it?
That's a worldwide thing, I would say.
It might be a worldwide thing, but we're talking about this country, aren't we? We're talking about, just because your next door neighbour has a debt doesn't mean to say that you need a debt.
But that's what he's. You can't just eradicate the world. You can't just go, the world has debt, so, we're just going to focus on us. The only way that the only way that everyone can help everyone is literally if by the time, hopefully, God help, that we don't have debt, is that if we don't have debt, and then the rest of the world do, we're not going to put any money, if we vote you, we're not going to put any money back out there. So if we get our country to stable and then they start getting worse and we have the money to help them and we're not going to, that's not right. That's not what we should do.
I mean, I didn't say we weren't going to have the money to help them. If we weren't in debt, we did have money to help them, that wouldn't be a problem, would it?
But we should help them anyway.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. Mark, getting very sore over here.
There are going to be various people sat here over the course of today listening to the answers to these questions and thinking, yeah, that they're missing the point. I wonder what the point is, and therefore I'd like to hear what the five of you think the point of politics is.
Politics means of the people.
Does it?
That's what the word means in Greek. That's how it came about. And yeah, it means about you. And that's the whole point. Politics, politics we deal with each other in our daily lives, and whether it's politics of the street or politics in Westminster, you can't get away from it. So I think this idea that we can all sort of have this utopia without politics is just nonsense. I mean, it really is. You know, and
we have a different politics.
Well, what does that mean? I mean, what does a different politics mean? Precisely. I mean, what do you mean by different politics?
I mean politics where democracy means democracy.
I think we have a democracy in this country.
Completely and utterly disagree.
It's not perfect, but it's a democracy.
We all voted, the person that got the most votes, and went, hang on a minute, you can't have consistency, we'll just put some, we'll pair you up, and then we'll just make it up, and you might as well not.
Back to Russell Brand, isn't it? I mean, his way of saying, well, everything's rubbish, so it's an anarchy.
Well, I didn't quite say that. I just said that wasn't quite how you lot want us to think.
I think we can have quite a long debate about whether the system works and how it works and the actual setup
I think I know.
of it. But the idea of today, of course, is to hear the views of the parties, how they work in relation to the questions and the actual subject matter. And perhaps we decide for ourselves whether or not we feel these people are worth voting in, or if we would have preferred none of the above as would have benefited him, as he said previously in previous elections. I'd like to just move the subject on slightly. We'll come back to the floor, but just bring some of the earlier questions in. Slightly different while staying on the social theme. Suicide is reportedly now the #1 killer of young men between 18 to 24, overtaking road traffic deaths. What should the government be doing about mental health issues, and how would you protect local services in this area? We could start with Hazel.
Thank you. Liberal Democrats are the first party, and I'm really pleased to say that the other parties have jumped on the bandwagon here, to actually come out and frankly say mental health issues need to be addressed, and they need to be addressed now. The statistics about young people self-harming and suicides with young men is absolutely appalling. We need to be able to face the fact that these are symptoms of our society. There are things that we need to address, and as your MP, I would want to do that. I would want to look at the causes of things as well as just the symptoms. And so our party has put mental health, including suicides, including self-harming, including severe depression, at the forefront of our thinking. Part of the National Health Service, where we've agreed to put £8 billion in, brought and paid for by cuts in tax dodging, money from that, cuts in the way in which Westminster works, and other areas. So we've got a funding